We want to welcome Brian Hamman, Republican candidate for District 4 in the Lee County Commission, to a meeting of the Daily News Editorial Board. This is a race where it's open to all Lee County voters, regardless of party affiliation, on November 4th. Welcome, Brian.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me in here.
We want to give you an opportunity here for the first couple of minutes to just kind of talk to folks about your background and your time here in Lee County.
Well, great. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I've been a county commissioner in Lee County for almost exactly a year now. Governor Rick Scott appointed me a year ago to fill in after Commissioner Tammy Hall resigned. One of the things that Governor Scott said really stood out when he was introducing me as his appointment was that when he interviewed me, I couldn't stop talking about jobs. Jobs, 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 I think is what he even said. In Lee County, it's so important to me to think about jobs and creating great opportunities for people to live here, work here, and raise their families here. Because I was born and raised here. I actually grew up in Cape Coral on Coronado Parkway. Graduated from Cape Coral High School, got an associate's degree at Edison State College and a bachelor's degree at Florida Gulf Coast University. And I realized that most of the folks that I grew up with who got those college degrees right alongside me have had to move away to find good paying jobs to support their family. They took some of the best and brightest out of the area to support their family. So to me, it was very important to come in with an agenda of trying to create good paying jobs so that we can get some of our best and brightest to maybe move back here, and so that in the future we can keep our best and brightest here as they grow up. You know, why am I running for county commissioner? Well, like I said, I was born and raised here and have benefited greatly from those who have gone before me to build this into a great community. And I feel like now it's my turn to help them pull at the rope to try and make this a great community for my 4-year-old daughter, who's going to grow up here and hopefully one day not be a day's drive or a plane ride away from us because she had to leave town to find a good paying job. In the last year, I feel like we've been a very effective county commissioner. The first thing we've done is I believe we've let business owners and taxpayers, customers, keep more of their own money. I think it's very important that when people keep more of their own money, they'll spend it. They'll use it the way that they want to, but they'll also use it to support local businesses and give them an opportunity to then expand their business and hire more people. I think if government kind of gets out of the way sometimes and lets people make their own decisions, they make good decisions that will ultimately help grow our economy. The other thing that I've been able to do over the last year is I promised people I would give them an opportunity to vote on term limits for county commissioners. It's a discussion that has been ongoing for the last 3 years, but really had never been pushed over the goal line. So this year I took the charge, led the conversation on term limits, and was able to accomplish a unanimous vote by the Board of County Commissioners to put the question on the ballot for 3 consecutive 4-year terms for county commissioners. And so you get a chance to vote now on if you want term limits for county commissioners. To me, it's very important that we get fresh blood in there. And a 12-year term limit would give you 2 years as a commissioner to kind of get your feet on the ground, and then a decade to serve. But then after that decade, I think we can all agree we would benefit from having fresh ideas and a fresh perspective on the Board of County Commissioners. So that's a question that'll be on the ballot, that actually is on the ballot for many of the folks who vote by mail-in ballot right now. So it's been a successful first year. I've enjoyed working with the board, and I'd like to be able to serve you for 4 more years.
Just in terms of your background before you came on the commission, can you kind of go back over your career with
Sure.
stations here in CenturyLink and stuff?
Yeah. Well, you know, I've been working ever since I was 16 years old. My dad said, Brian, if you want a car, you've got to be able to put gas in it and pay for the insurance for it. So started working. My first job was at Wendy's in fast food, to tell you the truth. They would work around my football schedule when I played football at Cape High. Then, you know, as I got to my senior year and started to identify that I wanted to have a career in television news, as a television news anchor, I started working behind the scenes at Wink TV locally. And when I graduated from high school, I was made full-time. So I actually worked full-time, more than 40 hours a week at the TV station, and I scheduled all of my college courses on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that I could spend as much time at the TV station getting real-world experience as possible. And by the time I was 24, I finished college on time with a bachelor's degree in 4 years, but by the time I was 24, I was actually named a main news anchor at the ABC affiliate in Joplin, Missouri. gave me an opportunity to hone my communication skills, which I believe are very important if you're going to be a public official, being able to communicate to people, what you're doing with their money. But it also gave me a chance to see the inner workings of government as well. Of course, we covered the local politicians and the local governments in the different areas that I worked. So it really gave me some keen insight into how to hold politicians accountable. I felt a longing, though, when my contract ended there to come back home where I grew up to start raising my family here. My wife and I had been married 9 years at that point, and so we decided to put the career on hold, come home, and start our family and let the rest of it take care of itself. So that's when I became a financial advisor. Throughout that time, I knocked on 5,000 doors to try and start my practice. Residential doors, talking to people in December of 2008, when the economy was literally at its worst here in Southwest Florida. You got a chance to hear about some really hard times, and it really gave me the desire to want to try and help. And so I worked as a financial advisor for a year and a half until I got a great opportunity from CenturyLink, a local telecommunications company here in town, to be their market development manager and basically help them launch their new Prism TV service here in town. So I worked there for about 3.5 years. That's when I really started to get involved with the business community through networking, Chamber of Commerce, and really it was a regional position that encompassed 9 counties, including Collier and Lee, and gave me a chance to hear about maybe where the Board of County Commissioners in Lee County could be doing better. So started talking to folks in the business community at that point, and many of them said, hey, we could use a younger, fresher perspective on the county commission, somebody who's got business experience, and I threw my hat in the ring.
How's it look different from the inside of being a government official now versus the outside of your journalism?
Well, for me, government is every bit as frustrating on the inside as it is for us on the outside. It does not move as fast as you want it to move. I absolutely have tremendous respect for the Sunshine Law and the reason why we have to have it so that everything the government does is open and can be inspected by the public. It does, however, make it really hard to try and communicate with your colleagues on the Board of County Commissioners. So as you know, it would prohibit county commissioners from talking to each other one-on-one about issues that they plan to vote on unless they're in a publicly noticed, publicly advertised meeting. So, whereas in the private sector, we could just walk down the hall, talk to our colleagues, and hammer out the problem, can't do that in government. You have to do it at a very it's laid out in a very strict process. So one of the things this Board of County Commissioners has done this year to kind of help with that, to kind of increase the communication between ourselves, is we've developed a series of workshops. So when you're sitting there, just the 5 of you county commissioners on this big stage in front of the audience that shows up at the meeting with the hot lights and the TV cameras on you, you find that you really don't look each other in the eye and you really don't talk to each other too much about the problems. You end up really just kind of making political speeches about your opinions on each issue. We've instituted now workshops that we hold in the afternoon after the meeting. Now, of course, the media is still there, the audience is still there, but we sit around a conference table much like this, and we actually look at each other in the eyes, and we have very candid conversations about some of the biggest issues of the day. And I think that was the biggest key to our success over this last year, hammering out the budget.
You mentioned focus on jobs. Aside from the cutting taxes and putting more money in people's pockets, what are the things you've either done or hope to do in the near term on that front?
I think number one, we've got to restore the integrity of the Economic Development Incentive Program in Lee County. People didn't trust that program, especially in the wake of such disasters as the VR Labs program. That was a company that basically promised jobs, received $5 million up front, but then didn't make good on those promises. So this year we've worked very hard on reforming that program and giving it some integrity back so that people can trust what's going on with their money. The way the program is set up now, if a company comes to Lee County and says, hey, I'll bring you several hundred jobs that will pay well above the average household income, I believe it's 1.5 times the average household income here in Lee County, they'll come in, they'll offer that. The incentives, before they can ever get a dime of your Lee County taxpayer dollars, they actually have to hire the people they promised to hire, build the buildings that they promised to build, pay the property taxes on that building, and then document everything. And then once they've given us that documentation and prove that they have performed on all those promises, we'll make reimbursement payments from their property taxes that they've sent us. So it's a much more accountable program, provides for much more accountability, and the companies have to perform before they get their money. I think that's the first thing we can do. You do have to compete. Counties all over the state of Florida and really all over the country are using programs like that to compete. Everybody's got some sort of quality of life that they can sell in their county. We certainly, I believe, have the best quality of life down here, but we also need to be able to compete, but we need to do it in a way that's very accountable to the taxpayers. So that's one thing. The other thing, I believe we need to streamline and continue to work on streamlining our permitting process here in Lee County. I think we need to take it to the next level. For projects that are extremely important, of regional importance, that could bring in several hundred jobs, we ought to assign them a concierge, basically, for lack of a better term, to help walk them through the process so that they can get their permitting and approvals in a timely fashion. We don't want to rubber stamp anything, don't get me wrong, but we want to make sure that the permitting process is smooth so we can get those companies here. Because in cases like that, time is money, and getting them through the process faster would save them money and maybe make us a more competitive place for them to choose to locate their business.
The economic development fund that's there, does that need to be boosted up further than what the commission's done so far?
Sure. So the reason why the county commissioners several years ago created the $25 million economic incentive fund was basically for marketing purposes. We needed to get they needed to, because I wasn't on the board then, needed to get the attention of the world that, hey, Lee County is here and we want your business to move here. So it was a time when the county was having tremendous success. Property values were increasing at such a rapid rate that the county did find that they had money to invest in bringing jobs down here. So they put $25 million aside and then basically advertised to the world, we've got 25 million reasons for you to move your business here. The conditions in Lee County right now are not the same. We are seeing rising property values again, but our bank account is not nearly as flush as it once was during the boom years. I think just from a pure financial standpoint, it would be very hard to create an account that had $25 million set aside in it. However, I do think on a case-by-case basis, if a major employer looks at moving here, we need to work with them to see what kind of incentives we could work with them on, as long as they're performance-based and transparent, to help them locate down here. Because think about it, if you get several hundred people making $80,000 a year, for example, here in Lee County, those folks are going to use a local realtor to buy a house. They're going to eat at the local restaurants. They're going to shop at the local stores. They're going to help out the entire economy. And I think that's really a good thing for Lee County.
Is there a value to a regional approach to economic development, or is it better to focus on Lee County, bringing stuff to Lee County? In other words, there's a cooperation between your neighboring counties of value, or does that just diminish the efforts towards Lee County?
No, I think there's an absolute value between working together, especially with Collier County. We've started this alliance. It's an economic development alliance that right now is kind of in its younger stages, and we've got to determine what it's going to be when it grows up and how it's going to perform. But ultimately, I think it's a great partnership. When you look at the market of Lee and Collier together, you've got basically 1 million people in that market, and that really will draw some pretty exciting businesses to the area. So no, I absolutely support working together with our neighbors in the region, because companies don't really see borders the way that governments do. You know, if a company like Hertz locates in Estero, well, the business is in Lee County, but it may draw employees from all over Collier and Lee, which I think ultimately boosts the entire region.
Talk to us a little bit, if you would, about the job you think the county manager is doing overall.
The county manager's been on board for just over a year now. He started shortly before I started, actually, I believe in July of 2013. You know, I think he got us through a pretty successful budget this year. In 2013, when they went to the final public hearings on the budget, 243 people showed up, mainly to complain about the budget at that point. There were some service level cuts. There were a lot of things in there that unfortunately people were not happy with. It was tough decisions that the commissioners at that time had to make. This year, We went through those workshops, many of those which were led by our county manager. Went through those workshops all year long, and we came to our final public hearings on our budget, and only 3 people spoke at the final public hearing because this year we had worked through a lot of those policy questions and a lot of those issues ahead of time. So I do appreciate his leadership on that.
There were some controversies involved in animal services there with employees and their criticism of the manager. Do you think the commission should have had a role in stepping in on that, to have somebody look at how the manager was handling that?
Well, I can tell you I certainly had plenty of conversations with the county manager about what was going on to make sure that he was taking the appropriate actions, that everything was above board in that situation. But the charter in Lee County actually describes, and the charter is kind of like the Constitution for the county, describes that the county commissioners are really only allowed to control 3 personnel: the county manager, the county attorney, and the hearing examiner. And it's really not the county commissioner's job to get down into the personnel level when you talk about the county employees. And I think that actually is a safeguard to the county employees. Could you imagine if a county employee didn't do something that one commissioner wanted, that commissioner might make his life hard, you know? And I would certainly hope that that doesn't happen, but I think we all know that safeguards like that need to be in place. So, you know, ultimately this is a situation where I absolutely have monitored and talked with the county manager about his decisions that he's made, but those are his decisions to make according to our charter.
The EMS service covers the county and does ambulance transport for the county.
Yeah.
Folks in Bonita Springs would like to see their fire department do some ambulance transport. Where do you stand on that?
You know, I think we have a great consolidated emergency medical service. I absolutely want to make sure that people get an ambulance on time as fast as possible when they call for one. I mean, public safety is the most important role that any government does, whether you're talking about the federal government and our national defense or our local government and making sure that your sheriff's department and your EMS service are well equipped. I would be, you know, concerned about seeing a very good consolidated countywide system start to begin to be fragmented. However, I do think it's crucial and very important that we continue to talk with the folks in Bonita Springs, especially the fire department down there, to make sure that they have everything they need. In fact, one of the first meetings I was able to be involved in through that process, we were able to get the ambulance, the EMS, the paramedics moved back into the fire stations because they had actually moved out of the fire stations due to a dispute over the rent. So I was happy that we were able to work together to get that fixed, get the guys back in the firehouses, and of course make sure that they respond to the folks who need them when they're in trouble.
We're seeing a lot of growth cropping up everywhere. Talk to us a little bit about your viewpoint on impact fees for the county, whether or not they're appropriate level now, or there should be adjustments there.
Well, the impact fee question is one that I think is going to be answered obviously over the next few months. The County Commission has just recently asked for the county staff to go ahead and get a new rate study on impact fees. The data that had gone into creating the current impact fee rates was well over 3 years old, and as you can imagine, our market has changed quite a bit in the last 3 years. So we need to get new localized recent data in order to make our rate decisions on. So we should get that study completed in time for March. If not, I would actually be in favor of pushing off the reinstatement of the fees until we get that new data. Once we find out what the data tells us about what our new rates should be, then the county commissioners can decide what collection rate we want, whether we want to collect 100% of that rate or maybe continue to provide a discount to continue to hopefully lead to more economic activity here in the market. You know, I have heard plenty of stories from even a doctor who said, you know, I had an old bank building that I moved into that had drive-through windows. I wanted to expand that building and enclose the drive-through teller area. However, I couldn't afford to do it because the impact fees would have been well over $25,000 and it made it prohibitive. The impact fee reduction, however, provided an opportunity for him to go ahead and enclose that building at a reduced cost, hire more employees, and grow his business. And ultimately, I think that's what we were all aiming for. So I would be very concerned. I think, in March of next year, if the commissioners take no action, the impact fees on a single-family home will go from $2,900 to $13,000 in one day. So that's a $10,000 jump. I think it's really important to have a conversation about what that might do to our economy, especially all the folks who are just now finally starting to get back to work, some of the subcontractors and the tradesmen in the construction industry.
Another growth kind of related thing that also gets into environment, which I know is a very important issue to you as well, and that is there's some concern in South Lake County about development starting to encroach on the DRGR. Can you talk a little bit about where you think the cutoff for that needs to be?
Well, I think the key word when we talk about development in general, and especially in the area of the DRGR, is balance. I think there is a very balanced way that property owners can build on their own property that they have bought and paid for, but that still protects and recognizes that our environment is the whole reason why people will want to move here and buy those houses in the first place. So some of the most recent plans I've seen come forward offer tens of millions of dollars in environmental restoration in order to be able to build on some of those lands out there. The environmental restoration includes things that we could never pay for as a county, like restoring historic flowways, setting aside almost 2/3 of these parcels for conservation. I mean, these are things that truly Lee County taxpayers would have a hard time affording at our current tax rates. But developers are willing to make those trade-offs in order to be able to put some homes on their land that they actually own. So I think balance is very important going through there. I think we can't ever forget that the reason why people want to move here is because of the environment, though, that we have.
Let's come back to the land acquisition. Does Lee County have itself well situated in terms of being able to go out and buy plus manage lands?
Yeah, actually, the 2020 program has gotten a lot of attention over the last year. The 2020 program is actually alive and well and very healthy in Lee County. It has $100 million in an account to be able to buy and acquire more land here in Lee County. $100 million. At our historic spending rates, it would take probably 5 years if you wanted to spend even $20 million a year on buying land. So $100 million in the account. And this year, the commissioners actually put $5.5 million in the general fund budget to maintain the 25,000 acres of land that we already own here in Lee County. So we have a budget to make sure that we don't become environmental slumlords. We make sure we're maintaining the land that we already own, and then $100 million to go out and buy more. And so I think it's very important now, as we talk about the future of 2020, to talk about how to make it successful so that when it does end up on the ballot in 2016 and people vote on it, that they'll feel good about voting for it. And that's what I'm going to be working towards over the next 2 years.
Another pretty substantial issue down in the south part of the county anyway is a vote coming up on Estero Incorporation. Mm-hmm. If you talk to us a little bit about how you see the county and Estero working together, assuming the referendum passes because they're planning a government light and to still rely on the county. Talk to us about that working relationship as you see it.
Sure. I absolutely support the citizens' right to vote in Estero on if they want to incorporate or not. And I assume that the incorporation will pass. It seems to be very popular down there. If the incorporation does pass, my hope is that we will have a great relationship between the village of Estero and Lee County. And like you said, they do plan to contract back for services through the county. So as long as they contract back for services through the county at a rate that is pretty much the same as what they are contributing to the tax base now in Lee County, financially, it shouldn't make a huge impact to either the county or even the village of Estero. I think it's important that we have great communication between the two governments and that we work very hard as partners going forward, no matter what the residents choose.
Speaking of partners, we've got the Water Management District, we've got the state involved in terms of the discharges into the Caloosahatchee River. What's the role of the Lee County Commission and the Lee County government in terms of trying to monitor and have influence on those releases?
Well, we are absolutely partners in that, and we absolutely have a role in that. You know, water quality and water quantity, the amount that flows down the river, is not just one single agency's problem. It's an issue that we all need to be partners in, making sure that we speak with one voice to get the funding for the solutions that are necessary there. You know, what's interesting about water quality and some of the problems that we're facing, the solutions are there. I mean, the Central Everglades Restoration Plan, SERP, and CEP, the Central Florida Everglades Protection Plan. These plans have actually been in place for decades now. Well, they've been in place for a while, for years now anyways. These plans have been in place, the solutions have actually been identified, but the problem is the politicians who go into office haven't funded the plans. So I think our role as county commissioners is to make sure that we work with our state legislature, our congressmen basically, and our senators to make sure that all of us identify the parts of those solutions that we want to fund first and get them funded. You know, one of the biggest projects we saw was the C-43 reservoir that got $18 million of funding last year to get started. But I think it certainly, obviously, is going to be a multi-billion-dollar project that could use plenty of funding. If we all speak with one voice to direct the funds to that plan, or to that reservoir, we can get it done.
How is the overall plan, spring training plan, working out? It was controversial. We've had a little bit of time to see how it works. Where do we stand? Where do we go from here?
On spring training, you know, the good news is both the Red Sox and the Minnesota Twins are now locked into contracts that will keep them here for 30 years for each team. So we're on very solid footing on those two partners. The debt on the Red Sox Stadium is actually on both the Twins renovations and the Red Sox Stadium, is being paid through tourist development taxes or bed taxes. This is something I wanted to know a lot about as an outsider coming into government. Was this our tax dollars going to pay for these stadiums? And the answer I found was this was tourist development tax dollars or bed tax dollars. Dollars that actually the hotel, people who stay in hotels, the visitors who stay in hotels spend or pay on their bill, you know, the little extra taxes on your bill, they pay every time they stay here for every night that they stay here. This money is restricted money. The state says you can't use it for anything other than beach renourishment, marketing to bring more tourists here, or stadium debt. So in Lee County, we said, let's take 20% of our proceeds from the tourist development tax and use it to pay for the stadium debt. So the tourist development dollars are the ones that are paying for the stadium debt here in Lee County. The good news is this year we had this wonderful thing called the polar vortex, which brought in far more tourist development revenue than we've ever had. The thing is, we need to be very smart about how we take that excess revenue and budget it to make sure that we can continue to make the debt payments, continue to our beach renourishment projects, and continue to market to bring more tourists down here.
Are there any rumblings of trying to fill the stadium downtown with another team? Do you still hear anything about that?
You know, it breaks my heart when you drive by that beautiful City of Palms Park and you see that the stadium is largely underutilized and empty. The great news is this year we actually signed a contract with Florida Southwestern State College, FSW, or Edison State College as it was formerly known, is going to start playing baseball again. And their baseball team, our local boys, will start playing in that stadium when they do get their baseball team back on the field. So that's exciting. They've also decided to move some of their athletic offices into the administrative part of the stadium. So now we've got tenants in that part of the stadium and they'll be paying rent as well. So the college is going to put in money for some renovations to the stadium so that they can use it for their purposes. We will have life in that stadium again. And then on top of that, there are plenty of amateur sports that actually do get played in that stadium, such as the Roy Hobbs World Series and other events that actually bring in tourists from out of town who stay in local hotels and eat in local restaurants and spend money here locally, and then also end up playing in the stadium. So there is still a benefit from that stadium. However, I would like to see someday another big league team play there if we can make it work financially.
Talking about Amendment 2 for a moment, if that ends up passing and, you know, we have medical marijuana, do you think it should be the job of the county governments, all 67 counties, and let's say Lee County, to either restrict or regulate, what is allowed within Lee County as far as clinics, and to kind of stop the possible quacks opening up clinics on every street corner, almost like a Starbucks, where people are just coming in to get prescriptions just to.
Thank you for asking the question
Sure.
about Amendment 2, because it is an important issue that's on the ballot. Let me just very clearly state that I respect the will of the voters, and whatever they do decide in November, on November 4th, to do with Amendment 2, I will honor their wishes. However, I have grave concerns about Amendment 2. If this truly is a medicine, and that's what we're talking about, a medicine, I have to go to the pharmacist if I want to get antibiotics. I have to go to a pharmacist if I want to get, free migraine, headache medicine. If you're going to get strong medical prescriptions, you go to a pharmacist who's licensed, who's got training, and he makes sure you get the correct dosage and gives you instructions on how to deal with it. I think that's how it should be distributed, and not in some sort of street corner smoke shop. I have real concerns about that. Especially, we got to talk about the zoning implications of that. Who would want one of those shops in their neighborhood? Who would want one next to their church or their school? There are going to be a lot of issues related to how to implement that legislation should it pass. But I do respect the will of the voters.
We've hit half an hour here, believe it or not. If you could just sort of summarize for us anything that we haven't covered here that you wanted to get out.
Sure, we live in a beautiful area here in Lee County, and I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't want to stay here. I was blessed to be able to grow up here and be born and raised here. I was saddened to see that so many people, some of our best and brightest, have had to move away from the area because they couldn't find good paying jobs here to support our family. I'm going to work very hard over the next 4 years as your county commissioner to make sure that we take the right steps to get government out of the way and allow businesses to grow and thrive here in Lee County, and allow businesses to ultimately be able to provide more opportunities for people to live here, grow up here, and raise their families here in Lee County. My family, we get together every Sunday for family dinner. My wife and I take our little 4-year-old over to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and we have dinner together. And to us, that's what works. It's not just about the holidays, but it's about once a week getting together. That's what I want for my daughter when she grows up, and that's what I want for your family, should you choose to have it. And so as your county commissioner, I'll fight hard to make sure that we keep our taxes low, that you keep more of your own money and use it to invest in businesses down here. I'll fight to get government regulation out of the way and make sure that you can operate your businesses in a way that's reasonable, obviously, and respectful. And I'll fight to make sure that our children have better opportunities to grow up here and to live, work, and raise their families here.